Bill Paterson, live in Fredericton, took my civil engineering degrees at the University of New-Brunswick, started into involvement with the association probably 1962, 63, somewhere of that order, and then went to work for them and so on. Got to the point where you did your membership as a counselor on the council, and then you did a vice presidency, maybe a couple of vice presidencies, and then you were president and then past president. So the president rather, in my case, was 1982-83. It was a lot of fun and a lot of hard work. As I remember it, my employer, ADI at the time, were solid with professional engineers on staff. And so they backed members of the staff in the participation and membership and officers and whatnot. But I do remember distinctly that it was about 700 hours out of my life as president that year, which was, and we gradually make that up, but ADI didn't ask for it to be made up. You just felt that you had clients and that had to be looked after. So we did. So that's how I got there. I wanted to build boats initially. I wanted to be involved with naval architecture, but that wasn't to be. I got interested in them and the engineering involved in them, or what I guess found out was the engineering within them and that sort of thing. And there was, of course, the dry dock in St. John. And when we were kids, those were nice big honkers coming out of that yard. So the nearest thing I could get was civil engineering. And there was a little bit of trouble as we went along the way as to whether I really wanted to be a civil engineer or an engineer at all, or whether I wanted to go into geology. A lot of kids have that, that's sort of in your first year or before you get to your first year. So it was, I wanted to build things. There are a couple of things that I would touch on. About the time that I had joined the university staff and was involved in then getting involved with the association, there were some technicians, engineering technicians in St. John, who were beginning to make noises about looking for a certification program for the credentials that they had. Ontario had done some of that and formed an association and so on. At national level, at the Canadian Council level at that time, there was interest in fostering that and seeing whether we could spread it across the country. So that was where I wound up on a committee, the very first committee that I had with the association here. And I was involved with them and their certification probably till I was president, at least until I was president, which was 63 to 83, more or less, at various stages in their development, and it was just great fun to see them and help them. There was some rough spots along the way, but to work with them with each step of the way, getting to certification authority, which had to involve the engineers at that point. In fact, at first, it was done totally by the engineers for the technicians. It went on from there, and there was a period where I think we were going to bring them into, at their request, under the Engineering Act. So there was satisfaction in that. That's fond is a strong word, perhaps, but there was personal satisfaction in that. And in a small way, I got satisfaction, real satisfaction, out of a very brief event that involved a member in Bathurst who had been awarded a life membership but hadn't got it yet, and who was known to be terminal. And we went up there and made the presentation in his living room. And to see the impression that it made on him and on his wife was one of the high points. It's not engineering, but it's because of engineering it came up. So I would have to rank those two, I think, as dominant in my memory. As I've said to the other fellows out there, probably some of those funny moments should be left unsaid, unspoken. But there is one that stands out in my mind, and the council meetings that we had, which were 6 or 8 a year, something of that order, were because of the loads that we were carrying in regulating the profession, got to be quite long. You'd maybe set aside a couple hours and they'd go 3 to 5. And councillors come from all over the province for their meetings in one spot, and the issue was some of them wanted to get home, and wanted to get home in daylight, particularly in this time of year. Others wanted to talk and talk and talk. And fairly, you had to, as chair, you had to give them at least some leash to get what was on their minds. But if you could go into the agenda beforehand, the night before usually, with the executive committee, and go through the items that might be contentious, or maybe not contentious, but one you could decide straight away and make a recommendation right off the biff, rather than waiting for a motion to come. It was said that maybe you were going a little too fast. You couldn't win. There's 2 parts to that particular question. First, no, I wouldn't have any trouble going back at all. I'd do it in a heartbeat, because it was a good experience, great networking, and there was a good deal of respect for the profession and the members in the profession and so on. Everybody worked together, so it wasn't hard work at all. Couple of things, and I'm not fully conversant with the details of the practice now, and I would refer to that, but my understanding is that where we rotated our meetings, our more or less semi-monthly meetings, around the province so we could meet with the branches, we did. Some we got to. Moncton, St. John, Fredericton, those got perhaps a little more attention, but northwestern, northeastern branches. It was, I think, in our minds that we should go have our council meeting, do our thing, and then in the evening stay over and meet with the members of the branch to see what they had on their minds, because the success of the thing obviously depends totally on what the membership have. We're there for the protection of the public. The members in the branches are the public. So it behooves us to know what's on their minds and see if we can smooth waters or raise another row. The name of the game is the protection of the public. And as soon as somebody decides that you're not protecting the public, that's when the thing begins to spiral downwards, and there is some danger of losing your self-regulation. It wasn't in our profession, but in one of the other professions, self-regulated professions, that a simple event brought the public into involvement with the public membership, into involvement with the councils, which was good. But it was a disagreement between an MLA and a member of another profession. And the result of that was the MLA saw legislation go through for public participation in the council of that particular group. So we have an onus and we have a responsibility to ensure that we know what's going on out there and what, in fact, public is happy with, what they're not unhappy, or what they're not happy with. So it's in a sense, I wouldn't like to use the word marketing, because you're not really trying to develop a business for yourself. But at the same time, if you hold the public interest as prominent, then really you have to take the steps that are necessary to make sure that since you have a particular technology or body of knowledge that in fact can protect the public, you have a responsibility ethically to make sure that you see that you're doing that. And that does raise issues that we used to see on councils from time to time, that there would be somebody outside the bounds of our members, and it would result in a complaint from a public person, and it had to go through the process of adjudication, and ultimately, finally, maybe a sanction, or maybe he's just, as it turns out, his particular problem is unfounded. But you got to do it. You got to do it. If self-regulation disappears, we should make sure that we're the last to go. Because I think we do have specialized knowledge. And to put specialized knowledge together with creativity, our members have the means for solving problems for their clients and their employers and so on, without endangering anybody. And we're in a technology, I believe we're in a technology advancing stage in civilization, if you want to call it that. So I think it behooves us to stay as long as we know we have the knowledge that we can use. And to some extent we can control that by knowing what it is that the public needs, what the technologies are, and through the accreditation of programs that we have with our universities across the country, you can ensure that the preparation for practice is secure and solid. It's a satisfaction. It's a satisfaction that it's interesting, and there are interesting people in it, and that it's worthwhile doing. It's an opportunity to give back, to start with. It's a pleasant experience. There's a fraternity and a esprit de corps and that sort of thing. There's a teamwork environment that, in a lot of cases, in a lot of issues that come up, that you can put a team together from the resources that you have and address a particular problem. So it was that kind of thing, and I guess laterally you'd finish up with saying, great opportunity for networking. The getting to practicing engineering as an individual involves a degree and involves experience which is supervised to an extent, or mentored as we speak. When I registered, I was 1 year out of university. The landlady that I had in St. John was the secretary to the association, presented me with the papers that night. But it was 1 year, the mentorship. Now it's 4. So there's been an evolution, and a great deal of good experience travels from the what you might call the seniors that are still practicing. But there's an onus on a member as well to stay current. And when you get to the point of my age, I would be pretending if I had to tell somebody I was current. The role of the association will continue, or should continue, but it's going to take work to do it. And the game is changing with all of the technology that's coming around, raising new successes, but some spectacular failures from point to point as well. I think it behooves that council to be aware of what's going on around them, and not perhaps because they've been successful in going the next 30 years, to get a little bit too complacent that they're a fixture, and not something that in fact is a work in progress, because it is very much a work in progress. Yeah, they're a problem that's political, organizational, and then technical, professional. And what we need to do is separate out, when the dust clears, to establish what it is it really involves or affects or might affect engineering, and take steps to make sure that we're ready for that if it comes. Other than that, it's just a straight advance of technology, and I don't think engineering design is ever going to become automatic. But if there's an opportunity to do it, somebody will try to do it. And at that point, I would be concerned, because you need the human judgment calls to apply the technologies in their appropriate ways. And that will always be there.